Coming to you from Farmer Dave's Kitchen here in Drake, Massachusetts, I'm Stacey.
I'm Denise.
And we're here to help you prepare your share. Cooler weather brings out the late fall greens, collards and kale. In front of us, we actually have three bunches. We have traditional collards here. We have kale, and this is the Tuscan kale, very flat.
Dino
and then
kale.
this, or dino kale, yep, which I think is hysterical. I think of Jurassic Park with that one. And these are Brussels sprout greens, actually. And the texture of them is pretty similar to the collards, so you're gonna prep them about the same. These are all members of the brassica family and are so nutritious for you in addition to being delicious.
That's right. So a quick prep review for everybody. So we have two different methods. Both are very simple. Completely personal preference altogether on this one. So Stacey.
I'm going to show my quick method, and I'm going to use the collards. Just going to take a couple out of the bunch here. And we've used this method before when we did the greens, and it's going to be just stripping off the stems. So you don't need your knife, you don't need anything like that. You're just going to grab the bottom with the stem sticking out, and you're going to rip.
Yeah. Look at that.
So then you wind up with the leaf, that's where the stem was, and then I usually just split it the rest of the way so that when I go to slice it, I've got a half of one. So I'll do it one more time with this one.
If you've had a rough day, take it out on the collards.
Totally take it out on the collards, it's pretty cool. So then we have this, and then at this point, I'm gonna put those aside. You can cut it into ribbons. A lot of the things I'm cooking, if you think about it, when you go to take a bite of something, you don't wanna have this really long ribbon coming out, so then you get it all over your shirt.
Awkward.
So, yeah. So what I'm gonna do is cut right down the pile, just to cut it in half again so we have small pieces. And then, scooch this aside so you can see. Then I'll go through and cut it into ribbons. Now, this is if I know what I want to do with the recipe. If I'm not sure what I'm doing yet, I will just take these leaves as this. And then as far as short-term storage goes, which we'll do with the kale too, paper towel, Ziploc bag, put it all together, get the air out. And by doing this, it's not going to wilt on you. If you put this in the fridge just like this, by the time you come back the next morning, it's going to look really sad.
Very sad.
So by stripping this, putting it in here, it's insulating a little bit, and you're still going to have crisp kale or our collards, and it's going to last you the rest of the week. So even if you can't get to it for 3 or 4 days, no big deal. Just do it just like this.
Perfect.
Now, what's your method?
Okay, my method is with my handy dandy knife. So you're just gonna fold these little guys in half. I know, I personify all of my vegetables. And then you're simply gonna cut out the stem. Very, very simple. Again, setting that aside. Now here, again, just like Stacey did, you can tear in half. I just have the two here, but just to give you guys an idea, same exact thing. Tuck your fingers when cutting. And again, just some beautiful ribbons. Very, very simple.
Now, there's a couple things you can do. Like I said, if you don't want to cut it in the ribbons and you want to even leave them whole, you can leave them whole. Take the stem out, just fold them and put them in. That way, if you want to make something stuffed, they're still all intact. Other than that, just cut them in the ribbons and cook with them. Now, what about long-term storage?
Okay, so long-term storage, one of the easiest things to do, very simple, is just to steam this in the microwave. You can just pop these guys in a bowl, just like this. Steam it in the microwave for a little bit, drain it, cool it, and pack it in a freezer bag. Let's pretend that this is actually already
that way we're not touching anything hot.
And cooled,
yeah.
And drained. You want to get that into the bag, press out the air. You guys know this drill by now. And then I'm gonna leave just the end open slightly, because then what you're gonna do is just kind of roll this little guy sort of like a cigar. And see what I mean? I left that end open. It let the air completely escape. So you're getting a nice, tight seal. Finish that, and it goes in the freezer just like this.
Now, one of the things I do with this is I try and do like one batch of kale or collards per bag, so then we know how much is in here. So if a recipe takes usually a pound or so, they kind of go back and forth on it, but usually a recipe will take at least 1, maybe 2. So if you're doing a stew or a soup or something like that, so then you know, if you have these marked, and I would mark them collards or kale, because once they're steamed, you're not going to know which one is which, but they'll fit. I have a container in my freezer, and I just have these stacked like this.
Right.
You know that you pull out 2, that's what you're pulling out. So then you can just...
So you're pulling out the pound or
now
the
you
2
can,
pounds.
and the other thing is you can either defrost them and then slice them, or you can cut them right out of the bag, and while they're frozen, you can slice them. So there's a lot of different ways, and the really good thing is when this stuff is available, it's so simple to freeze, it's so simple to steam and put them up for the winter, and then you have fresh kale. It's not grocery store kale, sorry, that's been sitting on a truck or anything. This is stuff that just got harvested, you just got it, and you're freezing it, and then you've got all this fresh food for the winter.
Absolutely.
For different stews.
When you're steaming it a little too, it's gonna reduce in size. If you've ever cooked any of these types of greens, you're gonna know that that's gonna reduce it into size. So that makes it even easier to get into your bag, roll it, freeze it, store it, and pull it out when you're ready.
And even if you're not sure, or you aren't usually cooking with collards or kale, there are so many recipes on the internet, tons of them. And wintertime, when you're not going in 14,000 directions, is a perfect time to experiment with your cooking. So if you have these steamed and already in, you have tons to experiment with and tons to cook with. And then you can try different recipes and see who likes what and things like that over the winter. So it's a really good time to stock up on all these right now.
It's great.
The first recipe Denise and I have for you is Crockpot collard greens with bacon. This is a great hands-off recipe. Chop and drop and then head out for a football game, a soccer game, and come home to a warm meal.
Did you say bacon?
I did say bacon.
So you can always omit the bacon or substitute with ham, or you can make this vegetarian. So our ingredients list, so here we go. 3 to 4 slices of thick cut bacon, or 6 slices, or
it might be the whole package.
The whole package. 1 to 2 cups of onion, medium and diced, 2 garlic cloves, or more if you kind of like a lot of garlic. A tablespoon of salt and pepper, red pepper flakes, start with the shake.
And then go from there. Some olive oil maybe to start it. The bacon is going to give off quite a bit of its own grease or juice, as we call it here. So that might be enough to be able to saute the garlic and the onions with, but have some olive oil on reserve in case you just have to add a little extra. And then also stock in a box is what I'm using today. So you could use chicken stock, veggie stock, your preference, your brand, whichever. I do recommend though using a low sodium one, because the bacon does have quite a bit of salt in it.
Agreed.
That way at the end you can kind of season it if you think it needs more salt. Collard greens, the whole reason we're doing this.
Beautiful.
This is a bunch of collard greens. In the crock pot, I actually used 2 bunches. So we destemmed them and then cut them in half, like we showed you earlier, and then just cut them in these really thin ribbons.
It's beautiful.
I like it in this shape because they're small enough when you're eating them with a spoon that they're not falling out off the spoon and down your shirt. And also having them this small, they're going to cook down a little bit more evenly. So you're not going to have areas, because even in a crock pot, you're still going to have the outer edges are a little hotter than the middle. So unless you're there stirring them occasionally, the outer ones are going to get cooked a little bit more. So if you have the big pieces, it's just better if you have them all kind of
That's a good point.
same size kind of a thing.
That's a good point.
So
excellent. So we're going to actually start this particular soup in a pot. Now, why are we starting this in a pot?
It is an extra step, and it's entirely up to you whether you want to do it. I do like doing the bacon separately in the pot because you're going to get more of a crisp texture on the bacon, and then you're going to be able to pour off the bacon fat, bacon juice, if you want to use it in other things. The other thing is I like caramelized onions. You can completely throw your onions in the crock pot and do it that way. You're going to leave these in for a while, so they're going to get soft, they're going to get sweet. I like caramelizing the onions and the garlic because I think it adds that little extra layer of flavor. You know, kind of like they say brown food has more flavor. It winds up having more flavor, and then you scrape it all in at the end.
Okay. So. I'm still learning some of these techniques myself as a new CSA member, so that's really helpful to know. Okay, so starting it in the soup pot, cook with bacon in the pan over medium to high heat. When you're done, remove and chop. You can see it's already been chopped here. You want to put the olive oil and the bacon, saute your onions, your garlic, red pepper flakes. So you want to do this for about 5 minutes
5
or so?
minutes or so,
you'd
yeah.
say? Okay. And then once you have that sort of all rendered down, what are we doing next?
You just add the collards in, and I add the collards in the soup pot just so you have all that bacon juice, bacon fat, all that stuff, and even the olive oil, and you're tossing the collards in so they're really well coated in all of it, because that's where the flavor is in this. And we've already added the salt, pepper, and very little salt in the beginning actually, pepper, and then the red pepper flakes, so that is really evenly coating the collards. At that point, I go and I put it into the crock pot. I'll make sure everything is mixed well. Okay. The bacon itself I add back in at this point, and then you're gonna close it, cook it on low, 6 to 8 hours. It honestly depends on how full you did your crock pot. Like I said, I did 2 bunches of collards, so twice this amount. And then halfway through the day, if I'm home, I'll go and I'll stick my head in, mix it around a little bit, but you don't wanna keep opening this, because this is the perfect environment to break down a tougher green like collards, so you don't want to keep letting all that heat and steam out at that point.
That's a good point as well.
Would you like to try?
I would love to try this.
Okay, here we go. So one of my favorite ways of doing this, you are going to wind up with so much extra liquid in here.
That looks amazing.
And you know, I've been told in the South they call it pot liquor because it's just, and it's green. If you, I don't know if we can see that.
That's beautiful.
So it's got that green tinge to it because it comes from the collards. So you've got all this delicious liquid. So
what you got in there?
Corn muffin right in the middle, and what's going to happen is the corn muffin is going to absorb all that pot liquor, and it's going to break down, and then you're going to have the cornbread to eat in between. It also adds a different texture to it. So you're going to spoon it right over.
I love the idea of the savory with the salt, with the sweetness of the cornbread.
And you can make your own cornbread if you want. I just grabbed corn muffins because it's going to wind up getting completely saturated and fall apart.
That looks delicious.
You get the first taste?
I do. Oh, well, thank you, ma'am.
There you go. And make sure you break it apart a little and try.
Yeah, we got to break this muffin up a little bit. A little piece of bacon. I see what you mean about not making the collard too big, your little ribbons, so that we can actually get that in our mouth.
Yep.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for considering that. Oh, that's good. Okay, that's really delicious. You can take a break. I'm going to eat this whole bowl right now. It's amazing.
Okay.
Excellent.
Now we're going to be on to the next one here.
Okay, so our next recipe actually was inspired from one of our farm interns, Joao, who's from Portugal. Inspired, loosely, because we may have added a little Stacey and Denise to this. So this is actually one of Joao's favorite dishes, and he and his family prepare this one quite often. I'm gonna completely hack the name on this one, Caldo Verde. They're gonna kill me. But it literally means green broth or green soup. The ingredients could not be more simple. You've got your kale, your olive oil, your salt, your pepper, potatoes, and chorizo. That's it. Like, you really couldn't get more simple on this one.
Now, the nice thing about this recipe too is that you don't have to use kale, and you can use different kinds of kale. So if you have curly kale, we have dino kale here, you can also substitute collard greens with this, and it winds up being slightly similar to this, where you've got a green broth soup with the greens, but I don't have bacon. She doesn't have bacon in hers. She actually has another special little meat there, and then the potatoes. So it actually kind of makes it a little bit more of a hearty soup.
Yes.
Than mine. Mine's definitely a lighter soup.
A little bit on the lighter side. So this one's definitely got a little bit more substance to it. So we did go ahead and use 1 pound of the dino or the Tuscan kale, washed, spun dry it, again, stems pulled off, and we showed you that particular technique. So take your aggression out on it, or you can use your handy dandy knife. 6 ounces of the chorizo sausage, which is a Portuguese sausage. It's delicious. It's one of my family's favorites as well. You can substitute linguiça. You could substitute any other sausage, whatever your family favorite happens to be. Your olive oil. We got a large sweet onion, and we did chop this little guy up as well.
And yours is definitely finer than mine.
Yes, I get a little crazier with the chopping. Okay. So salt and pepper, 2, and I kind of like garlic, so I may have done 4.
Yeah, I do too. And I love this little gadget. This is what because I don't necessarily always chop it and then pulverize it. I like having the little pieces, but I don't want big pieces, so I'll grate this with the big hold grater.
That's great. That's a good way to do that as well. Makes it a little bit easier. 4 large baking potatoes, peeled, sliced, and water. I used water. You can also use like a veggie stock if you prefer. Again, try a lower sodium because we've got a lot of salt going on with your meat. So start with whatever green you decide that you like to go with. And like I said, we ended up going with the dino kale here. And you can see that we have this cut up. These kind of look like little tortilla
strips.
Just to give you kind of an idea of the size. Or, you know, kale confetti. I kind of enjoy that myself. So you want to make sure you've got this all taken care of and sliced down very thin. Then the next thing that we're going to do is
potatoes.
Start with, you've got your potatoes, you've got the chorizo, the onion, and your garlic. We're going to start in a pot, same as we did before.
Right.
We ended up doing our meat first. So,
and that gives off all that meat juice and the flavor and probably the color.
Yes.
From the sausage too. Okay.
It absolutely did. So I ended up doing all of the meat first, and once it cooked up, and you'll see once we serve, you'll know once it starts to brown, your edges kind of start to curl up on that a little bit too, so then you'll know it's done. Slotted spoon, remove that from the dish, and then we're gonna go in with the onion. Now, I did a little trick, and I ended up doing my onion and my garlic together. But you pointed out a really good thing about keeping these two separate.
There's nothing wrong with them together because the onion kind of buffers. The thing you have to be careful with the garlic is if you let the garlic get too brown or you let it get burnt, it's going to get very, very bitter, and then it really is a start over thing with the dish. You're going to have to dump it out, wipe out the pot, because that bitterness is going to stay in there, especially if you've just rendered the fat on there and you've got all that nice brown that you haven't taken out yet. So what I normally do is I'll start the onion first, let that get just a little bit of a head start.
Okay.
Then I'll put the garlic in and just maybe not bring the heat up so much, but where we have so much onion at that point and the onion is so fine, it really is a buffer for the garlic. So I wasn't too worried about that part with
That's
that.
a good to know.
The other is the pot.
Okay.
These pots, it's a enameled cast iron pot. The heat is more even. So if you're using a less expensive pot or a very thin pot, chances of burning your garlic and onion are greater. So I would use a lower heat and it may take a little bit longer.
Okay.
So when I cook in these pots, I'm not as worried about that because the heat is really even on the bottom. So just a little.
These are the tips that are making me a better cook.
Just little things.
That's fantastic. So next thing is going to be for your potatoes. So you're going to put the potatoes in there. We're going to get these little guys sauteed about 3 to 5 minutes until your onion and your potatoes really sort of begin to color and come together. So good. Then you're going to add the water. It takes about 25 minutes for these guys to boil. And then when you know they're done, you take a wooden spoon and you just kind of like put your spoon in there, press the potato against the side of the pot. If it smushes, you know you're good to go.
You're good to go. Okay, great.
Excellent. So when they're soft enough, then we went ahead and took a potato masher. And in the pot, literally
so you're mashing it in the broth.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're actually mashing it up in the broth. It didn't take too long to do. Again, sort of kept it all in one pot, which was nice and easy.
Now that's really nice too because you've got all the flavor of the sausage and now you're smashing the potatoes in the broth so the starch is actually thickening the broth without adding any like dairy to it or anything. And also, that is sucking up the flavor from the sausage and things like that because it's going to hold it a little longer. That's going to be good.
I know.
So next step is going to be adding in the sausage.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
So we're going to add in the sausage, and you're going to make sure that it's on about medium, probably medium heat at this point. Just keep stirring it, making sure everything's combined, and then about 5 minutes, and then you're going to add the rest of the greens. Now, the greens are really bulky, so if you've got like 2 bunches of this cut that small, you're gonna have a pretty big mound. So what I would do is maybe in halves or thirds, add it, stir it, give it a few minutes. That heat is gonna wilt it right down again. So do a third, add it, do a third, and go like that, and then put the top back on, and you want it to simmer how long? at this point?
Honestly, the recipe called for 5 minutes. I went a little bit longer. We actually tasted it, and as you keep referencing, this is a little bit of a heartier green. It did take a little bit more time to really cook it down so that it was more al dente, almost like a pasta.
So this is almost something you can do where if you want more crunch to your green, start at the 5 minutes, taste it.
Yes.
If you want it to go a little longer, let it go a little longer. It is a soup.
Absolutely.
It's going to be very difficult to overcook. You're not going to wind up, I mean, you're not going to go an hour.
Right.
So it's not going to affect your other ingredients.
Correct.
But this is kind of what we're talking about where you make the recipe your own. So even if you're like, the kale is still bitter, it's still, you know, it's got that edge to it, I don't like the crunch, you know what, let it stew a little longer.
Cooking
I mean, it's cooking in that delicious broth. That's all it's going to be able to do is, you know, soak up all that good flavor, right?
Absolutely.
So am I going to get to try this now?
Yeah, you get to try this. And feel free to double the meat if you want more meat. Are you ready? She really wants to try this.
I've been smelling it all day.
Like smelling this all day.
She didn't taste mine before this segment started, and I
Okay,
didn't taste
fair.
hers, so we have absolutely no idea what they actually taste like.
And again, we are saying have fun with your cooking. This is a great way to clean out different items that might be in your refrigerator or your freezer.
This is actually a great clean out the crisper soup. Both of them are.
Yes.
So if you know you're picking up your CSA share and you still have some greens, what a good way to use up the greens.
It's a great way. And maybe you have some dino kale, maybe
See
you
how pretty
have
that
some
is?
collards. You can put 2 different ones in there. Clean out your crisper. It doesn't have to be perfect.
You can mix whatever you want to mix. I need a piece of...
Yeah. Look how good that looks.
I gotta
All right,
do
go. Yeah,
this.
dude,
I
really
need this.
making a mess. What do you think? That's a mouthful.
The piece of sausage I got was a little large. That broth is amazing.
It's delicious.
The broth is amazing.
It's
got
really
the
taken on the flavor of the meat. You can taste the onion. The little bit of red pepper flake gave it a nice little kick.
I also think when you mash the potatoes down, it's got body to it. It's not just
Absolutely.
water or broth. It's got a little bit more
A
thickness
lot of
to
substance.
it. So this is really good. Oh my goodness.
So
All right.
we changed the recipe up a little bit on Joao, but hopefully he'll enjoy the soup later.
So please try these two and clean out your crispers and grab some extra kale and collard greens and experiment.
Have fun.